Does writing or art have a presence that speaking doesn't have? And does not this presence mean the work can have a life separate from the author?
Yeah, that I think is the Derrida point, isn't it?
Yes.
That speaking and writing, the writing, as it were, sets the thing outside you.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. That was one of the things I used to really wrestle with at that time. Although, you know, in Derrida, there's a hint that even speaking distances the work.
Right.
You speak something, it becomes something that's cast off from you.
Yes.
So writing has a very technical sense in Derrida. But yeah, you see, what's hedging around people who worry about this is the feeling that somehow or other the work is out there and public. And if it is, I ought to be able to get this without all this. That's Beardsley. You've got all the quotes in my book. They're all there listed. The work of art is a public act. You know, the author lies behind it in the inaccessible realm of the psyche. You know, stick to what's there in public.
Yes.
Well, my problem was that I was brought up by the students of Wittgenstein, who say, look, there's no such thing as a private mind. You know, the mind is laid out in your public acts, in your speakings, in your writings. Yeah? They're not just cast off from you, there they are. And so when you wrote to me, I got a sense of your personality. I can adjust it when I meet you,
yes.
but I get a sense of it. Yeah? When we meet people in the street, we can often see that they're being cruel to people and rude to people. We don't say, there's their public act. That's cruel, but behind it there might be a private mind,
yes.
Which is really nice and benevolent. You met the wonderful bit in Oklahoma. He loved everybody and everything and everybody, but he never let on. You know, so that when he looked cruel in public, he was nice behind. It doesn't work like that. And I want to say similarly, and I even say when writers try to hide themselves, they sometimes reveal themselves most when they do that.
Sure,
you know,
sure.
You can't lie. You know. You know, somebody said to me, well, you know, Tolstoy is a magnificent novel, it's sensitive, it's perceptive, perhaps he was just a boring old cretin. You know, you want to say, for 1,000 pages? You can't do it. So, although the writing, it's all public,
yes.
But the mistake behind your question, and I think that although it's at the moment too difficult for me to get my head around, the mistake I think in the way you put the question is to say there's a private mind and a public work,
right.
And we should concentrate on the public work. And I want to say minds display themselves in public actions of which the works are there.
Right, right.
The interesting question is one you're going to come to at the end about your manifesto, about the imperfection of it, but I want to say something about that later.
Sure. Okay. Isn't finding the author's intentions too complicated and in fact impossible? How am I meant to know the mind of another?
Yes. And that's a question about the body-mind problem in philosophy. If you're a Cartesian, and remember that Sartre, Derrida, that whole Foucault, that whole tradition were anti-Descartes. That's the other great tradition.
Right.
Descartes said, there's the mind, there's the body. The mind is in one realm, the body's in another. Next question, how on earth do you get to the mind? And all you've got is the body. Now say your question again so I can get the exact nuance of the question right.
Isn't finding the author's intentions too complicated and in fact impossible?
Well, first question. People can lie about their intentions.
Right.
People can even be confused about their intentions. And one thing I want to say about that is often you can be a better judge of the intentions of the author than the author. You know, because you can deceive yourself.
Sure.
And one of the things that worries Derrida is the infinite possibility of self-deceit and not knowing yourself. Right?
Sure, sure.
And you know the great behaviourist joke. You know, the two behaviourists meet in the street, and one says to the other, "You're fine. How am I?" Now, sometimes you do know better than this, and sometimes there's no problem about intention. When you read Milton's Paradise Lost, you can see exactly what he's up to and how incapable he is of doing it. He may not know precisely what he's up to.
Mm.
Now, but there's another thing which I think makes me slightly sometimes nervous about your use of intentism.
Right.
That sometimes it's not really intention that I'm after, and I want to make a distinction about intention in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what I'm after is the trace of the author in the work.
Right.
Because I want to say here, he made the right choice. Here he didn't make the right choice. The distinction I want to make about intention is one which I think Beardsley never made, because he was a dualist behaviourist. There is intention in the sense of when I sit down and say, what shall I do? And I form a prior intention. I'll go shopping today, and that's a prior intention.
Right.
But there's a sense in which I can see somebody behave and I can say that action was intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody trips on a paving stone and I say that wasn't intentional. I see Charlie Chaplin do it and I say that's intentional.
Sure.
And the brilliance of the way the intention is achieved makes me applaud him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, if you say to me, do you know the author's prior intentions? I sometimes want to say I have no idea what his prior intentions were, nor do I particularly care.
Mm-hmm.
He may have wanted to do this to make money, to impress his girlfriend, right? You know, for any number of reasons.
Yes.
And Milton said his intention was to justify the ways of God to man.
Mm-hmm.
He may have thought that was so. I'm pretty certain his real intention was to show himself the successor to Homer.
Right.
You know, a bit of pride in
Sure.
the great English epic. But that's, so if it's a question about prior intention that we care, if it's about what do I see in this work, about what he intended here, he intended to put this mark next to this one, but it would have been better if he put it this side.
Right.
Yeah?
Yes.
How can you do criticism without identifying that kind of intentionism in a work?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? And that's compatible with, I can use the work for my own purposes regardless of his intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So,
Sure.
yeah, but I bet you can't. I mean, if I said to you, okay, do that with War and Peace.
Yes.
You can do it with little things.
Sure.
And don't forget that a work can be important to us for reasons which the artist might not know.
Mm-hmm.
And people sometimes love a piece of poetry because it's the one they always used to read to their wife, or their wife used to read to them. So a work can take on significance, but I bet the person loves the poem
Sure.
for the same reason as most other people love the poem. It's just that it takes on additional significance.
Yes.
It's often, I think Derrida sometimes is thought to say you can do what you like with a work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's infinitely readable. I doubt he actually said that.
Right.
Indeed, in the book I give the quotations from the essay on Paul de Man, which he says just the opposite. So you can do anything you like with a poem, but you're not doing what you like with the poem.
Sure, sure.
Richard Volheim used to say to me that you can sit and look at moss stains on a wall and see castles,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. You can't really do that with a work of art, because the work of art directs your attention in certain sorts of
Sure,
ways.
sure, sure.
Right. You can't read anything you want
Mm-hmm.
into anything. Frank Sibley once said to me, you can sometimes make good jokes this way. Frank Sibley said, he was my great teacher in aesthetics, one of the significant names in modern aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, could you imagine Oedipus the Rex being done as a comedy?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I can almost do it, you know. And he did this wonderful imitation of a stand-up comedian,
Right.
telling the story of Oedipus Rex. And he gets to the end and he said, and it was his mum! You know, everyone rolls around laughing. He said, really, you
Yes.
couldn't get away with that too much, could you?
Sure, sure.
The thing dictates a reading to you.
Mm-hmm.
And the reading it takes is often the one which, whether he knew it or not, the artist had at the back.
Right, right.
Mm.